word of
Are
the
you
moment.
suggesting that it's not in the national interest for Albo and Jody to be
wandering around like a couple?
playing tourists, handsome boy and Jody? Well, I mean, this certainly was a very useful visit for the Chinese Communist Party. They got great propaganda out of
campaign.
it. So it didn't do much for US-Australian relations. I'm sure the Trump administration was keenly interested in this visit, how it was being portrayed in China, and some of the things that Anthony Albanese has had to say, whether it's in the national interest beyond boosting tourism from China. I'm not sure, James.
Well, yeah, I mean, this is the most ridiculous thing here. A 6-day trip ostensibly to sign a memo of understanding about Trip.com, which is some sort of travel site, designed to get more Chinese tourists into Australia, which is great and fine, happy for them to come and spend their money. That's wonderful. But this whole thing, 6 days, no other ally, no Japan, no South Korea, none of that. 6 days getting duchessed by the Chinese Communist Party, told how wonderful he is, and being used, this is the really sinister thing, being used, Australia, as an example for other countries to say by China, hey, this is how you should behave. Don't raise any concerns, don't raise any big issues, and then we can all be sweet and have trade. But then this is the way that they're wedging the United States because of Donald Trump's tariffs, China is now able to say, oh, well, we're the more reasonable ones, which, of course, everyone knows that's not true. And yet there are some lefty commentators in this country who have been trying to defend this trip and Albanese's behavior by saying, well, once upon a time, we had this naive, unsophisticated foreign policy of going along with the United States. But now that we're standing on our own 2 feet and sucking up to China, boy, we've really grown up.
You know what? I mean, he has been essentially Xi Jinping's useful idiot right now. And
that's a nice way to put it.
That is a nice way of putting it. But this is going to also hurt us, I think, when we finally get the sit down with the US and we come to an arrangement with tariffs, particularly with the action they're about to take with pharmaceuticals, which we export 2.1 billion pharmaceuticals to the US every year. That is in jeopardy because the US wants that manufacturing to be US-based. It's all about America first, bringing back manufacturing. So the tariffs that they're talking about putting on pharmaceuticals are going to be astronomical. It's going to impact Australia greatly. So for us to be having the Prime Minister gallivanting around China, providing propaganda for the CCP, instead of acting in the national interest and making sure the relationship with the US is repaired. Right now, it's at its lowest point.
Well,
it
actually goes beyond just the U.S. alliance, and I agree that's vitally important. But even more important, this has been a subtle undermining of Australia's sovereignty and our ability to speak up. Now, Australia does not raise any issues that are uncomfortable for China unless there is absolutely no other choice but to do so. Like, for example, when those Virgin Air pilots saw the live fire exercise, they never would have said anything if it wasn't for the Virgin pilots who had saw that and declared it. We don't say anything now about human rights. We don't say anything about the CCP's behavior in Australia, the spying, the attempts at political suborning, the harassment of Chinese diaspora population. All of these things we don't say anything about because now, it's in our national interest to have more trade. And it's interesting. There is a funny little bit of a split, actually, within the government, and I don't really give Penny Wong a lot of credit very often. But several months ago, she had a big thing where she said, Australia needs to diversify who we trade with, and yet we are going all in. And now Albanese says, well, they're our biggest partner by 4 times to our next biggest trading partner. And instead of saying that's a bad thing and we need to shift that down, he's saying, let's go all in and let's go harder.
Because it's not like China uses its economic might to punish anybody who challenges their positions on anything. We've seen them use economic coercion. They used it against us when we asked some questions about, where did that little virus come from? What were you guys doing in Wuhan? So it is just opening yourself to so much risk for the country to be dependent on China. And what we are doing is we're exporting our natural resources to them. They are using it to enrich themselves and sell back cheap crap to us. It is an arrangement that I would question whether actually is in our favour anyway. Just because there's a great deal of trade doesn't mean that it's actually enriching the country. We're not having manufacturing here. They're manufacturing over there, selling it back to us? How about using some of those natural resources to have cheap energy so we can have manufacturing jobs here, so we can actually make things here again, because we used to do that.
The bottom line is it was excruciating. It was cringeworthy. It was an embarrassment. I'm afraid Anthony Albanese wandering around looking like a cheap tourist from a cheap Kon-Tiki tour guide thing was just excruciating. We are now a vassal state to China. That's the position he's put us in. This is how the Chinese emperor likes it, that you come, you pay tribute. There was even an awful moment where he had to stand around outside the doors to Xi Jinping's room. He wasn't allowed in until the great emperor was ready. You completely demeaned Australia. Anthony Albanese, you should hang your head in shame. Australia is a great, powerful nation. We are mates with the greatest military power in the world. We should be like that with America, the greatest military power that has ever existed. And we used to be like that, and Anthony Albanese has pushed us away. And as Rita says, that will only be to our detriment. And the other huge joke of all this thing was they were wandering around banging on about green hydrogen energy as if we're going to be some weird climate change superpower. It's fantasy built upon stupidity, built upon playing into China's economic greed, basically.
And indeed, you have to go back and look at the fact that Albanese brought along business leaders. This is what the whole point of this was. It was all about economics, and one of them actually on the trip said that security can be a distraction. Security can be a distraction.
Right.
Now, that tells you all you need to know. And it's really ironic to me that, the great socialist left Labour Prime Minister Anthony Albanese is flying over to China with a bunch of billionaires to line their pockets with green hydrogen and green steel subsidies. I don't think that leaves the average Australian with much.
How much talk was there about, I don't know, China using slave labour, using
the
Uyghurs
I can
who
tell you
are
right now,
being...
none.
a third of the world's emissions, and that wasn't mentioned.
The human rights abuses that China is guilty of, how much discussion was there about that? We hear about atrocities committed hundreds of years ago that we were all supposed to be ashamed about, have this collective guilt in the West. What about what China's doing now, right now, to its Uyghur population, to any political dissidents? Why is that not being discussed over your 6-day visit?
Exactly, of course, because we're a vassal state.
I think you hit on something, though, really important there, Rita. And that is, you said a moment ago, this is all, we have in the West, we have this colonial guilt. Yeah. And we feel guilty about having been alleged colonizers and all that sort of thing. So in a way, vassalizing ourselves to a new power like China is almost penitential.
Yes, exactly.